Endlessly, the waves of the Pacific roll up on rugged shores at the western boundary of our nation. Here is a great empire of mountains and majestic waterways, with turbulent streams racing down from the heights through vast primeval forests to the sea. An agricultural empire, the fulfillment of the dreams of pioneers, unexcelled in beauty, rich in achievement, and still offering a challenge mighty as the mountains. This is our Northwest Empire. Running north and south, the Cascade Range divides the area into two sections with widely varying climate. The western part is lush from abundant rainfall, while the eastern half is of a more arid nature. The two states of Oregon and Washington are divided by one of America's greatest rivers, the Columbia. Today, Union Pacific follows it from eastern Oregon to Portland, fanning out into Oregon and Washington on both sides of the main line. Extending some 1,400 miles, the broad Columbia provides a natural gateway to this vitally important empire. Along the south bank roll Union Pacific freight trains, hauled by giant diesel locomotives. The might of the industrial East flows westward over these rails, and eastward goes lumber, products of orchard, farm, ranch, and mine. Imports from Alaska, Hawaii, and the Seven Seas all ride this steel highway. And so do throngs of passengers. In the early morning, a sleek streamliner is speeding along the Columbia Gorge to Portland, a far cry from this ancient locomotive enshrined at the Portland station, the Oregon Pony, first steam locomotive in the Oregon country. Portland, the metropolis of Oregon, is a busy seaport, although virtually 100 miles from the Pacific. Shipping, lumbering, and agriculture have created a typical American city of widely diversified interests. Its early New England settlers would be amazed at Portland's modern dock facilities along the Willamette River, which joins the Columbia below Portland. Yes, there have been some changes made since the pioneer days of the old Oregon Trail, where covered wagons and stagecoaches used to congregate, now are large freight yards. From the air, Union Station and train sheds take on the scale of a toy railroad. Portland spreads along both sides of the Willamette River. Nationally known as the City of Roses, Portland boasts a variety of blooms. In the spring, the city is almost engulfed by radiant azaleas. They thrive in the moderately gentle climate west of the Cascades. The floral displays in residential areas enhance more modest homes as well. Rhododendrons bring their brilliant hues to Northwest gardens, but roses are tops. The annual Rose Festival Parade provides a big day for Portland. It shows the inevitable queen and attendants, prancing drum majorettes, brass bands, floral floats decorated with gems of feminine charm, and a floating merry-go-round, all to the utter amazement of Portland's future citizens. Well, after all, there's nothing quite like a parade, and in many ways, no other city quite like Portland. Every afternoon, the streamliner City of Portland pulls out of Union Station, headed for Chicago, and points east. Across the spectacular countryside streaks the golden streamliner. Passengers relax as scenic beauty begins to unfold for long stretches of interesting landscapes lie before them. Here at Oregon's Multnomah Falls, we say bon voyage to our eastbound travelers. These falls on the Columbia River Highway are world famous. Millions of people have admired the ribbon of foaming water that falls from the cliff 620 feet to the highway below. Although the Northwest is a vast country, Portland and Seattle are only 187 miles apart, with the Puget Sound city of Tacoma between them. The railroad, here running along the shore of Puget Sound, and adequate steamship facilities make Tacoma a center of world commerce. Situated about 50 miles north of Mount Rainier, Tacoma is a well-balanced community, highly important in the regional economy with its busy port and many commercial interests. But Seattle, at the end of the run for this Astrodome streamliner, is generally considered the Queen City of the empire. From across the bay, the commercial hub of Washington is an imposing spectacle with its solid ranks of buildings. Here at the extreme northwest tip of the United States has risen one of the nation's great cities with a population of about 500,000. Here the free spirit of the Old West blends with the dynamic drive of modern industry. Seattle's commercial monuments proclaim its solid achievements in years past, and future possibilities are limitless. Miles of office buildings, smart shops, and fine hotels reflect the buying power and wealth of its enterprising citizens. And Seattle's great harbor, along with that of Portland, share the major traffic to Alaska. It is also the nearest American port to Hawaii and the Orient. Into the holds of freighters moves an endless variety of products, including Northwest flour for export to all the world. Out of other ships come great cargoes of fish from northern waters. Much of this fish is quick frozen and shipped to all parts of the country. East of the harbor is Lake Washington with its famous floating bridge. Here's a wonderful recreation spot, practically in the center of the metropolitan area. Along its shores are homes both large and small, whose owners can go swimming right in their own front yards. Seldom are citizens of a great city provided with both fresh and saltwater beaches. While some communities have neither, Seattleites have a choice. Why go to the mountains when skiing is so good right here? Speedboat races on Lake Washington provide plenty of excitement for lakeside residents. In a spirit of utter abandon during Seattle's Seafair, the city's businessmen take to playful piracy and force one of their crew to walk the plank. There's no inhibitions in this motley crew bent on nothing more serious than a good time. The Seafair comes but once a year, but down at the docks, the serious business of shipping goes on every day with cargoes of infinite variety. Passenger liners, too, move in and out of Puget Sound, making Seattle an international port, the largest city of our Northwest empire. And it can truly be called an empire built on water. The mighty Columbia drains an area almost a third as large as Europe. Concrete milestones of the march of progress are the huge dams spanning the Columbia. The Dalles Dam is the fourth in a series now at work on the famous river. A concrete fish ladder permits the homing salmon to reach their spawning grounds in the upper tributaries. The dams produce enormous amounts of hydroelectric power. This is Grand Coulee Dam, built by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation on the Columbia, 92 miles west of Spokane. It serves a dual purpose, creating power and storing water for irrigation. The world's largest concrete and steel dam, it is 4,300 feet from bank to bank. Grand Coulee helps to irrigate over 1 million acres of dry land in the eastern Columbia Basin. Excess water goes over the spillway down the river to be impounded by other dams. One of these is Bonneville Dam, constructed by the Army Engineers. It too produces hydroelectric power. Huge generating plants use the water to generate electricity for thousands of Northwest industrial establishments. A smooth, uninterrupted flow of power is of vital importance to an ever-expanding industrial commonwealth. And seldom are the benefits of extensive enterprise confined to a single group or segment of industry, whether labor, agriculture, commerce or transportation, the wheels of progress turn for all. Union Pacific freight trains bring in raw alumina and carry away the aluminum ingots produced in plants like this. From the moment the powdered alumina enters the plant, technological science goes to work producing that versatile metal so essential to modern living. Great amounts of electricity are required for smelting the basic primary aluminum. Because of the abundance of hydroelectric power and convenient rail transportation, there are many of these plants in the Northwest today, turning out aluminum for the manufacture of everything from thimbles to skyscrapers and railroad cars. At Tillamook, Oregon, this modern plant devoted to the making of cheese is one of many scattered over the area. A temperate climate and lush pastures combined with high-producing herds make the manufacture of cheese big business, and Northwest cheeses are famed the country over for variety, flavor, and goodness. Towering above much of the countryside are snow-capped peaks, and marking their slopes are vast forests. Lumbering has been the economic lifeblood of Washington and Oregon, supplying the nation with a high percentage of its wood crop. Power tools have replaced brawn in modern logging, and when today's big tree crashes down, it has already been replaced by a seedling in a reforestation program that will provide us with forests forever. Precision logging prevents waste, and in the American tradition, heavy machinery does the heavy work, swinging great logs as if they were so many toothpicks onto waiting trucks, providing maximum safety and saving manpower for skillful tasks. There are enough logs on this load to furnish lumber for a 5-room house. Today's logging is done on a scientific basis far different from the methods employed many years ago. When human skill and modern machines complete their work, the massive logs are ready for their jaunt down the mountainside. And here they go on their way to the mill. In watery storage yards adjoining the mill, logs are segregated according to size and variety. Here the new arrivals are deftly introduced to the river. As each log enters the mill, it quickly succumbs to the bandsaw and, losing its identity as a log, is soon on its way to becoming finished lumber. Probably no industry contributes more to American progress. In the manufacture of plywood, special peeler logs shed their layers of wood, which are welded into sheets of great strength. In this extensive mill yard, various types of lumber await shipment to all parts of the country and the world. Lumber mills and paper mills like this one are good industrial neighbors by nature and necessity. Pulp made from particular types of wood and wood refuse, which formerly went to waste, is here made into various types and grades of paper. From delicate tissue to newsprint and heavy milk container stock, these great machines roll it out endlessly. With an almost inexhaustible supply of source material available, the milling of paper is an expanding industry in this part of the country, involving thousands of workers and millions of dollars annually. Diversified agriculture is a keystone of Northwest prosperity. Fruits, berries, vegetables, poultry, sugar beets, wheat, dairy, cattle, and sheep all are important to the regional economy. Apple blossoms are the spring prelude to the tempting fruit to follow in the fall, when bumper crops from the heavily loaded trees make their annual appeal to the taste of the nation. Northwest apples with names as familiar to the buying public as those of famous movie stars, the product of a region rich in soil and climate. Growing them has become big business, and veritable armies of pickers at Wenatchee, Yakima, Hood River, and other Northwest points harvest the luscious crop. An average yield of various kinds of berries brings an annual $1 million market return. The Northwest is noted for its fine berries. Most of the crop is fresh frozen. Green beans for canning and freezing are also an important crop. Beef cattle are raised profitably on irrigated pastures. Like a sea of gold is the vast wheat country of the Palouse, the Walla Walla, and the Umatilla. Progressive agricultural methods and adaptable varieties have increased production, and wheat and flour are important Northwest commodities. There's some beautiful country in Northwest Oregon, and majestic Mount Hood is seldom out of view. On the lower slopes of this white peak, in late spring, bloom countless millions of rhododendrons. Mount Hood, rising in icy grandeur from Lost Lake. Like people, mountains have distinctive facial contours, as these close-ups of Hood reveal. A neighbor of Mount Hood, across the Columbia in Washington, is imposing Mount Adams. Some 35 miles west of Adams, and at the moment wearing a cloudy crown, is another jewel in the Cascade chain, Mount St. Helens, displaying ancient lava flows from the adolescent period of the Northwest, forming the basin of Spirit Lake. Tipsoo Lake is one of the many charming little beauty spots set against the backdrop of magnificent Mount Rainier, fourth tallest in the United States. Learning a little geography from an expert in the National Park Service, Uncle Sam at his best, administering for all the people, these crown lands of democracy. White-robed Mount Rainier, called by Indians the mountain that was God. Crater Lake National Park, at the crest of the Cascade Range in southern Oregon, is one of America's scenic marvels. The lake rests in the very heart of a huge mountain. Volcanic action created an enormous crater in which the lake was formed. 2,000 feet deep and 6 miles wide, with a circular shoreline of 26 miles, it is enclosed by multicolored cliffs rising up to 2,000 feet above the lake. It is said that the nearby Klamath Indians believed Crater Lake to have been a ghostly amphitheater where the gods dwelt. The silent lake inspires the viewer with unfeigned reverence for one of Earth's sublime creations. Through deep forests of Douglas fir, this highway leads to Olympic National Park, a vast domain of over 800,000 acres. This park includes some of the most primitive areas in this country of rugged mountain scenery. Spectacular Puget Sound in Washington, first explored in 1792 by Captain George Vancouver. In natural beauty and commercial value, Puget Sound is one of the greatest assets of the Northwest Empire and a matchless vacation land. This ferry boat serves the San Juan Islands, carrying visitors on excursions through a group of heavily wooded islands comprising a beautiful recreational area in Puget Sound. Residents of local beaches spout their objections to the slightest disturbance. A touch of the finger brings instant reaction from these large clams, known locally as horse clams. Mighty delicious in San Juan clam chowder. The cold waters of the Northwest produce a variety of seafood of fine quality. Commercial salmon fishing is a lucrative enterprise. Here a purse seiner is setting its net. Overboard goes the pilot net, which will be followed by the seine. And here goes the big one over the stern. These boats are usually operated by a skipper and 9 men. Now the 2 men in the dory are pulling in the pilot net, while the main net is taken in by the rest of the crew. Gradually, the net is closed in at the bottom, which explains the term purse seiner. Finally, it's tightened up, and the braille swings the fish neatly into the storage compartment. Some varieties of salmon weigh up to 50 pounds. These smaller Chinooks are famous for fine quality and flavor. With a good catch stowed aboard, the seiners are homeward bound. Looking more like a placid lake, the waters of the Columbia River, backed up by the Dalles Dam, now flow peacefully over an area which once looked like this. For centuries, Celilo Falls was the traditional fishing grounds of the Indian. Long before Lewis and Clark passed this way, favored fishing locations on these rocks were being handed down from father to son in tribes of the locality. Today, these famous fishing grounds have passed from view, completely inundated by rising water back of the Dalles Dam. The Indians received compensation, but their famous landmark has vanished beneath the floods of time and progress. Pleasure boating and sport fishing are popular recreations. Unique fishing accommodations sometimes border on the extreme. Curling logs in competition for fun and glory. It calls for perfect equilibrium as well as a sense of humor. Fancy footwork determines the outcome, but shucks, it's as easy as falling off a log. Today, descendants of tribesmen who once harried the covered wagons parade in tribal regalia at the famous Pendleton Roundup, an annual event in which local citizenry and neighboring Indian tribes turn the city of Pendleton into an old-time Eastern Oregon cow town, commemorating the achievements of the sturdy pioneers who braved long months of cross-country hardships to reach the new land at the end of the Oregon Trail. These sculptured faces were made for eagle feathers. And these Indian girls are real American beauty queens on horseback. There's a real Western flavor to these real Western sports, whether it's riding a sun-fishing bronc or roping a cantankerous calf in a matter of precious seconds. In the eastern portion of the empire are vast tracts of public lands devoted to the protection and propagation of wildlife. Here live many varieties of birds and animals not commonly seen. A few years ago, the trumpeter swan was almost extinct, but now has made a remarkable comeback. The marsh is made to order for the sandhill crane, while Sonny Boy is high and dry in his bassinet of bulrushes. With widespread wings, Mother Crane tries to attract our attention away from her young. A nest full of young cormorants singing for their supper. And a baby great blue heron betrays his already developed sense of self-protection. No beauty prizes would be won by these young pelicans, and Junior makes the best of what he has for the camera. Life is worth the living on this federal bird preserve, where their only enemies are natural ones. A great blue heron skims across the sky and comes in for a graceful two-point landing. There's a bit of a wind, but the ground crew holds down the nest while waiting for chow. A true aristocrat is the Brewster's egret. This baby antelope, only a few hours old, lies quietly until his mother calls him away. Not bad for legs never used before. And practice makes perfect. Strength and speed, symmetry of line, and rhythmic grace of motion contribute to the ease with which the antelope covers the ground. Action never duplicated by man or machine. Even the slow-motion camera fails to slow these speeding antelope down very much as they race across the desert at 50 miles an hour. Unsurpassed for rugged beauty is the Pacific coastline of the Northwest. At TACOMA Point, as well as all along these shores at the western edge of our continent, white crested waves beat against gnarled rocks and sea-sculptured cliffs. Here, perhaps more than anywhere else, the visitor senses the free spirit of the far west, and the waves of the restless Pacific produce a deep serenity. Close to the sea runs the Oregon Coast Highway, world-famous scenic drive. White surf and sand, blue inlets, and dark green trees create vivid and ever-changing compositions. High on the cliff at Hecate Head stands this lighthouse, a warning to ships at sea to avoid this rock-bound coast. Great rocks, breaking the force of waves, make the broad sandy beaches all the more enjoyable. Extending for hundreds of miles, they add much to the joys of Northwest outdoor living. Low tides bring hundreds of clam diggers to sandy beaches in quest of razor clams. It takes speed and skill in digging for razor clams, as they're mighty sharp about eluding the shovel. The expert reaps a rich reward of big, juicy razor clams fresh from Pacific beaches, a real Northwest delicacy. These rocky crags just offshore are a paradise for sea lions. They lounge around in the sun and roar with delight as they dive into the briny. Yes, the life of a sea lion is just one long vacation by a swimming pool. Other offshore rocks provide homes for millions of seabirds, whose plaintive cries as they dive off the rocks drowns out the roar of the surf. Occasionally, out of the Pacific, rise the bulky forms of whales, monarchs of the seven seas for countless ages. So, at continent's end, blue waves pound against the shore, as they have since the world was young, sounding their eternal music at the portal of our mighty Northwest Empire.
Thank you.